Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fireside Chats with Shruti Kapoor. In these Fireside Chats, I bring engineers and developers from the community who share not just their ups in the stream, but also the downs and the struggles that they've been facing. The reason I created this stream is because personally for me, whenever I see people doing amazing things on Twitter and LinkedIn, I feel like everybody's just doing such an amazing job and everybody's so famous. And how are they doing all these cool things? Meanwhile, when I myself have struggles, or meanwhile, when I am facing adversities, I feel like I'm the only one feeling like this. I'm the only one who's feeling an imposter syndrome. And maybe it's just me. And by talking to people in the community over and over, I felt like there's a need for fireside chats like these where people can honestly share the struggles that they've been going through as well, and share the human side of being a developer in the tech community. That behind this fame, there's actually a human who's going through the same struggles as you. And so these fireside chats, I bring amazing developers from the community who share their life stories. And I'm very proud to share who I'm bringing on today. I'm bringing on Nick Taylor today. He's been working at OpenSauced, and you probably know him from Dev2 as well. I used to receive emails from Nick Taylor every week from Dev2 because I was subscribed to Dev. Nick is a senior software engineer at Open Source, and he's a big fan of open source. And we're going to talk about open source today, and has a growing interest in serverless and edge computing. Let me bring Nick on stage. Hey, Nick.
Hey, how's it going, Shruti? Great to see you again.
Great to see you. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Yeah, I think a lot. I can't remember. Did I see you at RemixConf after? Because we did a Twitch stream as well on my channel, but I can't remember if I think that was before RemixConf, and then I saw you at RemixConf, or
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. It was super cool to meet you in person, and we'll just meet a lot of people in person because that was actually the first conference I had attended in person. So it was just, I was like pretty excited. So yeah, it was just great. The energy is seeing people, obviously, and instead of just like being stuck in like a Zoom box or like a Twitter avatar, or X, as the cool kids try to say these days. But
it was so cool to meet you in person. And I remember like we had such like candid conversations even at RemixConf, and that's why I thought like it'd be great to bring you on stage as well. I think RemixConf was so fun. I remember like being the MC and just like having a blast, dancing on stage. It was amazing.
Yeah, we did at the end of the conference. I apologies, but I don't remember what the dance was. But it was a lot of fun, and I think there was a video, or there was at least a few photos, I think.
We did Bhangra, and the music I played is kind of similar Punjabi music.
Okay, yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Actually, I introduced you, but do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So like Shruti said, my name's Nick Taylor. I'm currently a senior software engineer at OpenSauced. OpenSauced is, I work in open source there. We kind of say we're maintainers building tools for maintainers. So it's a really exciting project. I'm biased, obviously, because I work there, but I was contributing to the project even prior to working there. So, and that kind of ties into a bit into career wise, because like I started contributing to open source in, I believe, late 2014 or 2015. I can't remember. But ever since I've been in open source, it's just changed the trajectory of my career in a very positive way.
Mm,
And like I got hired at Dev 2 for my open source work. I was pretty much one of the more frequent external contributors to the project. I was actually the first external contributor to the project too. And basically I'd been doing a lot of front end stuff for them, and then at one point they're like, "Hey, why don't you just come work with us?" So that was super cool. And it's since then, like, I've been working in open source since 2020, including at OpenSauced now, and prior to that, I was at Netlify working in open source as well on the frameworks team, which is one of the reasons why I was at RemixConf. So, it's just been I don't know, I love working out in the open. I know maybe it's not for everybody, but I strongly
mm,
encourage it, even if you feel a little uncomfortable. Like, I kind of always relate it to like my first contribution to open source, I was like super stressed. Like
mm,
because in my head, I know better now, but like at the time I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. It's gonna be perfect. They're gonna accept it and it's gonna get merged into the code base. And that's that's not what happened. But I mean, it did get merged, but there was obviously feedback. And
right.
I also I didn't know Git at the time. I used to work, mainly in Microsoft technologies, and at the time, I was using other source control. Uh, there was one called for Microsoft called TFS, Team Foundation Server. So, like,
Mm,
open source was my introduction to Git as well. So, like,
oh,
and I know everybody's gone through this. You're like, "Oh, I messed up my branch," or "I don't know what I did, let me just delete it and redo it," or something like that. So, it was just kind of like this whole big ball of, like, I it was stressful, but once I did it, the Band-Aid was torn off. And,
mm,
just like anything that people are potentially intimidated to do, once you do it and then you do it again,
yeah.
it just becomes more natural over time. And, you know, it it's one of the things that helped me career-wise getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And, I think it's a really good skill to have. Like, it's like I know, I've said the obvious thing here, but, like, nobody knows everything, and that's
Yeah,
100% okay, and I never pretend to. But the thing I'm confident about in my skills, and I don't mean in a cocky way, but I'm confident that I don't know this thing, but I know
yeah,
I can learn it, you
yeah.
know?
You can figure it out.
So and so
Yeah,
and that ties into getting a little uncomfortable. And I think it's important too because that's how you grow, like,
yeah,
that's how you like, whether it's your career, whether it's like you're doing a sport or something, you have to go through this hurts my brain, or and then
yeah.
then there's that aha moment, and that's satisfying too. So
Yeah. Actually, like, I feel like with open source, a lot of people feel the same way because it can kind of get really intimidating to even get into open source. And especially
yeah,
because if it's like a big library like React or something that's really popular, it can become
yeah.
really intimidating and you don't really know like where to enter or like how to start making contributions. So I'm curious, like, in 2014, when you entered open source, and started making contributions, how did you find your first open source library? And now, like, when things probably are so much different since 2014, how how would you recommend somebody who's looking for their first open source contribution to find something that they can contribute to?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for me, I was working at a company, and even prior to that, I was working in .NET technology. So I was doing C Sharp, ASP.NET, and we were using Angular on the front end and some bespoke JavaScript stuff. And this is this is back in like 2014, 2015. React had already been released. It was released in like 2013. and
Mhm.
I had heard about it, and I was like, I want to try this out. So the thing was, at work, we were never going to use it, and I just and I was also trying to transition away from uh, .NET technologies, not because 'cause they're bad, it's just, like, I always was a fan of JavaScript, and
Mm.
so I like, in my brain, I said, "I'm gonna learn stuff about Node.js, I'm gonna dig into React," and so that's how I found my first project. So I was just basically I think maybe in 2015, I might have been on Twitter, maybe. I I
Hmm.
I can't remember how I found it, but, um, I I went to go work in Barcelona in 2016 at a startup, and it was TypeScript and React, like, so it's like it's been a
Wow.
while, but this is, like, earlier days, like TypeScript was not bad at the time, but it's way better now, same thing with React, uh, but I needed to learn these things, I had no professional experience, so, I Dan Abramov had a free Egghead course, it's still free for Redux, so
Yeah.
I watched that, I learned that, and then in terms of React itself, because people used to kinda mix up Redux with React, and it's not part of React at all, um, but I found this project, there's I think a pretty well-known consultant, React consultant on Twitter and elsewhere potentially, but Corey House, he had this, React boilerplate project, and so, like, today, like, when you wanna go work in a framework, there's meta frameworks, so there's, like, Next.js, Remix, or if you're in Vue, there's, like, Nux and so on, SvelteKit, but in the early days of, like, React and stuff, these things didn't exist, so you would find people would create these React boilerplate projects, which is essentially like, this is kinda like what I like to use, and I copy paste this kind of every time I do a new project. And so, like, you'd have to configure Webpack and just React, and anyways, I found this boilerplate project, it was called React Slingshot, by Corey House, and I started contributing to it because I was like, I need to learn React, and then so I got quite a few pull requests merged into there, and then at one point, Corey asked me if I wanted to be a maintainer on the project, and I was just like, still trying to get out of my comfort zone. I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And that was kind of like my intro to getting into React, to getting into open source, and also first time becoming a maintainer. So a lot of pluses, if I think if you're okay with, just like I said, getting out of that comfort zone, I think it'll reap a ton of benefits for people. Oh, I can't hear you for some reason. Uh,
Is this any better?
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
not sure what
Weird.
happened.
Randomly.
That's okay. Side note, that's the beauty of live streaming. It's not supposed to be perfect, so
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what happened. So let's move this guy out of here. I was saying, I totally forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah, being curious and like willing to be uncomfortable, and like willing to step out of your comfort zone kind of helped you get your first open source.
yeah.
So today, React, I think, is still a great place where people can find, or like the React ecosystem, not React itself, is a great place where people can find their first contributions. Are there other avenues where you would recommend people find contributions, especially for people maybe who are like more back end or like not quite sure, they're just entering the field?
Yeah. Yeah, so the first thing, like, in terms of, like, being interested in a project, like, typically, the projects I've contributed to are projects that I actually use, like, for example, like Dev 2, I was blogging there, so and the when it became open source, I was like, "I wanna make the platform better." So, like, because, another piece of the puzzle is, at least for me, is I wanna be interested in what I'm working on,
Hmm.
so it's a
Yeah,
lot easier to say like, "Oh, I'm gonna go work on some open source on something I actually love,"
yeah.
versus Okay, I guess I'll put up a pull request for this random project just so I can get some open source contributions, you know?
100%.
So but in terms of finding projects, again, I'm a bit biased, but like OpenSauce has like you can search for projects. We have like a if you go to app.opensauce.pizza, you can explore there. GitHub also has an explore feature. Um, the other thing is, and this kind of ties into the whole working in public or learning in public, you know, like talk to other people, like, you know, like I know you're pretty active on Twitter as well, Shruti, but like try and find some communities. Like I'm part of the virtual coffee community, which is I'm a big fan of. I'm in the open source community even before I started working there. You know, I'm in your Discord now. That's another place where I can meet other like-minded people potentially. I have my own Discord too. There's like a bunch of Discords. Chantastic has like lunch.dev and so on. Uh, so I think finding community is probably the best way to find a project after that, but
Yeah.
aside from that, yeah, I would, like, check the resources I was mentioning about exploring projects and, you know, I think I don't know as many projects for backend, obviously, because I'm more front-end focused, full stack, but,
Yeah.
like, my coworker, John McBride, he works on, it's a CLI tool called Cobra. It's written in Go, I believe. You know, people do contribute to bigger projects, but, like, the bigger projects can be intimidating, I get it. Like, I
Yeah.
think contributing to React, like, maybe 6 years ago would have been a little easier than it is
Yeah.
today. You know, like, there's a lot of stuff going on in there, you know, like,
Yeah.
so, like, you know, concurrent mode, fiber, all those things. It's like it's, like, my coworker B. Dougie always says, like, you know, don't necessarily go, you know, jump into open source and say, "I'm gonna contribute to React." It's nothing against React, it's just I think that would be, like, too big a step to take, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you really need to understand all that architecture really well, but,
Yeah.
you know, like you were saying, the ecosystem, you know, so, like, maybe contribute to Redux or, like, a newer project, you know, there's, like, Solid, yeah, there's all so many frameworks now, but, and I see somebody in Discord is saying that they like Cobra, which is what I was mentioning. Um, you know, there's I yeah, I think the community and just exploring those 2 pages I was talking about, and we can share them after if you want.
Yeah.
Um, and just speaking to people too, like, like, really not to sound cheesy, but, like, community is a big part of a lot of it, you know? And and who knows, maybe you end up starting your own project too. I'm personally terrible at creating my own projects, so, like, I've always kind of gravitated towards, "I'm just gonna go help on this one," or
Yeah, me too.
so,
I'm kind of the same. Um,
yeah.
I think you highlighted a really good point there, which is like when you are working on a project, and if that's an open source project, that's a really great avenue to make contributions to as well, especially because you want to be interested in what you're working on. And this way you
Yeah.
can get to know the project like well enough and in and out. So that's a really great avenue as well. And we often use a lot of open source projects, so that will be a great avenue for even people who are working on the back end as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's definitely a ton of backend projects out there. I just don't know them as well just because I'm not as involved there. But
Yeah.
the other thing I'd say too about open source is I'm sure like a lot of people are aware the job market, layoffs and all that stuff. It's been pretty rough. I always tell people that are looking for work, whether it's a career changer, somebody starting out, because I speak to a lot of these people in communities, or even if you're a seasoned developer and maybe you got laid off, or maybe you're looking for a change, open source is one of the best ways to showcase your work because it's publicly available and it's not
Yeah.
just about the code, you know, like obviously it's nice to get a green square and like say I, you know, committed code to this particular project. You know, I'm an engineer, so I can appreciate that take for sure. But there's other things that are super helpful, like creating opening issues, you know, and giving
Mm.
really good feedback. Like one of the proudest things I was proud I'm saying that incorrectly. One of the things I was really proud of, it was, I think, end of last year. I ended up creating the remix adapters for Netlify,
Oh,
and at the
cool.
time when I started doing it, I ran into this issue. I won't go into all the weeds, but basically they were using a polyfill for fetch that didn't wasn't completely standard, and so, like, I
Um,
was getting all these weird behaviors in a certain scenario, and I basically documented, like, everything. Like, I didn't fix the issue, but I gave so much context and, like, here's the error, and it happens when you do this and this, and they really appreciated it, and I just felt really good about that. And, that wasn't a
mm,
code contribution, but it's still, you know, it's
meaningful
still
contribution.
valuable. Exactly,
Yeah,
and there's so many ways you can contribute to open source, um but yeah, the thing I was getting at is, like, career-wise, I think it's the best way to put yourself out there, because not only are you in the project, you're interacting so people can see publicly, like, how you operate. um, Also, like, a lot of people wanna work remote. If you wanna be like, you work remote like I do, it's super important to be able to communicate asynchronously,
yeah,
and a lot of that is in open source, so that's, like, in pull requests, issues. So the more context you can give and stuff, it's just good in general to leave, like, a trail of what's going on, but also it's super important when you work with people in other time zones and stuff. So like, there's just a lot of positives, I think. I'm not going to say it guarantees you're going to get a job, but
yeah.
it's a big way that you can showcase stuff, especially if you don't have professional experience.
Yeah, and it helps a lot, right? Like how you said, you got your job at Dev2 because of your open source contributions, and then your open source job as well. One thing that I'm curious about is if somebody is not working at a open source company, like company that makes open source products, like for example, I am not working at a company that's making open source products.
Yeah.
How could somebody who is making open source contributions tie that to their career or their career ladder at work?
Yeah, well, even if you're not building out open source stuff, you're consuming a lot of open source tooling probably. Like,
Yeah,
anybody that does front end means you've probably used Webpack, you've used Vite, you've used Babel,
yeah,
you've probably imported a library like maybe like Lodash or like a date time library. So all those things, even though you're not directly doing open source, so like, and and not all employers do this, but one thing I've learned as well career-wise is it never hurts to ask for anything.
hmm,
Who knows? Maybe there's like maybe you can have some dedicated time to explore other things, and even though you might be contributing to open source, which doesn't directly affect your work, it still, it could still be a good thing. It's also, I think a lot of people like the idea of working in open source or contributing to it. So, like,
yeah,
I think in some cases, some companies even use it as a recruiting tool to some degree, like,
hmm,
hey,
yeah,
come work with us. And, like, you can have some time to work on open source, or we have, like, even though we're pretty much a closed source company, we do have some open source stuff, and you could work
yeah,
on that, like, I definitely know, like for me, ideally, if I can work in open source the rest of my career, I will,
yeah,
but and that's no knock against closed source stuff. Like, I worked in closed source before 2016, but but yeah, I think that's ways you could tie it in. Like, even, I mean, the tools are pretty mature now, but like, people in the past have contributed to like Babel or Webpack and like,
hmm,
even Vite. So I think there's opportunities there. It,
yeah,
you know, it really, I think it depends on the company, because not,
yeah.
you know, but yeah.
Yeah, like to your point about, companies kind of using it as a recruiting mechanism, we kind of did that at PayPal as well. So
Okay.
we, even though at PayPal we were kind of like closed source and like enterprise software, we still had some open source components that we were using for our checkout. And so people who worked in the checkout team, they would be able to actually make open source contributions while working at
Okay.
PayPal code. And so this was really cool. Like same year, like that's another way we can attract candidates towards this team and recruiting efforts as well, and
Yeah.
allow people to work on open source outside of the enterprise code. And we also like at PayPal, we also had like access to JavaScript as what ECMAScript as no, not ECMAScript, TC39. Totally forgot the
Okay.
name. We
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
had access to TC39 as well, another place where you can make contributions as well. So, yeah, like
yeah,
sometimes companies also appreciate their employees making open source contributions and encourage that as well. So I think, like, yeah, asking wouldn't hurt. And sometimes there
yeah,
are avenues to do that as well. I know that Slack also contributes to TC39. So, yeah.
yeah. And another thing I'll say, it ties into open source too, but like in terms of like getting potential employment, I remember I didn't get the role, but I applied to Khan Academy back in, I think it might have been 2018. And one of the things I did was I discovered they had an open source project, and I can like people were using it kind of like a script that they would run on a page for accessibility tools. And I converted it to a browser extension, and I kind of just mentioned that when I applied, and I think that was like it showed interest in the company,
Oh,
and anyways, there's just lots of things you can do. It, it's not really a hot take or anything. It was just I think a unique way to potentially get you on the radar of a future employer. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think I was just mentioning this to somebody as well yesterday. They were in front end, but they wanted to switch to back end. Or
okay.
like they were in back end, but they wanted to switch to front end. But the interviews they were having, all the interviewers told them that because they don't have any code that's pushed out to production, they
Mhm.
can't really accept their role as a front end engineer yet. And I said, well,
Okay.
open source would be a really great place because even though you're not working for a company, you're still pushing out production code, and
Yeah.
that is one way you can show that you're interested in front end or back end without having to work for a company that is actually doing front end or back end work.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Like, that's, like, getting back to, me learning React, that's what I did, I was already doing full stackish, but I was like, we're not gonna use React here, and I wanna learn it." So, I just
Yeah.
took that route, and it did work out for me. I mean, I think it was a bit of a perfect storm too. This was, like, early days of React, so anybody that knew any React was probably, like, more in demand, but,
Yeah. It's like AI now.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just put, a just register an AI domain and you'll get phone calls probably. "Yeah, this is, my, nick.ai domain, yeah, yeah." So, yeah.
So I'm also curious, and like when I work in open source, I feel like I feel really intimidated, and especially like when switching careers, I feel like I'm like in this new field by myself, and I don't really feel like taking help because I feel like people are gonna judge me. How did you ever feel like that working at open source or like working in open source, or in any of your companies that you worked so far?
Never felt judged, really, but the thing is, like, even not working at a company that's in open source, but just contributing to open source in general. One thing yeah, like, I'm probably saying a lot of obvious stuff here, but, like, when you wanna contribute to a project, a maintainer is typically very excited that you're interested in their project and that you wanna improve it. So, there's stuff you have to make sure is set up, like, there's a contributing guide and all that, but, like, maintainers are typically pretty happy to get people doing contributions, assuming you follow the guidelines and stuff. So and it goes back to the feedback thing too. It's totally normal to get the feedback, but I've never had anybody kind of like looking down on me or anything. I
Hmm.
will preface that also with I am a white guy in tech, so there's a lot of things that I don't have to worry about that I know a lot of other people do. So I'll just throw that out there. But
Yeah.
generally, it's been a pretty great experience for me.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
great. I love that you said, maintainers are always excited to have new contributors because that kind of makes it a welcoming environment and easier for new people to enter as well. Um, Changing gears a little bit, I know you worked at Dev2, and I'm always really interested in the blogs that come out of Dev2 and having like firsthand experience working at Dev2. Tell us a little bit about like for especially for people who want to start making blogs and they
Yeah.
feel like it's even React, for example, is a very saturated field. How can somebody who wants to start writing blogs or start creating content get into making blogs? And well, let's start there. And then my follow up
Okay.
would be what makes a good blog?
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So the first thing, and people have probably said this to people listening before, but just start writing. Now, like as a developer, you're like, okay, I'm gonna write a blog, but I need to set up my blog first, Let me
Yeah,
go install Astro or whatever, then I'm gonna tweak it and I'm gonna make it exactly how I want. And then 2 years later, you still haven't written a blog post. Um, and there's definitely nothing wrong with like creating your own blog like site, like your own personal site. That's not what I mean. It's more like it's almost like a procrastination tool to
yeah,
some degree.
definitely.
So so the first piece of advice I would say is just start blogging, and that can be anywhere. If you do have your own site set up already, just start blogging. Or if you use Dev2, there's Hashnode. Those are both super popular. Some people still use Medium. I think Medium is a little less used for technical
Yeah.
blogging, but you can blog on LinkedIn. There's a lot of platforms, but the main thing is just start writing.
Mm,
And you know, the other thing is like you were saying about React there, like, "Oh, why am I gonna write a blog post
yeah.
about use state? There's been like 2 million other blog posts already." Although that might be true, the thing there's there's a few reasons why I think you should write. The first one is selfish. You should write for yourself because it
Mm,
solidifies your understanding of something.
absolutely.
So so do it for that first. The other thing is, 2 million other people wrote about it. Well, guess what? Even if you write another blog post about, use state and use reducer, you might actually reach other people that couldn't grasp the concepts in other posts they read or other kinds of content.
Yeah.
So there's that. Um, it really is just like anything. People love to procrastinate, so I really just strongly advise you to just start writing, and it doesn't mean you have to write like the great American novel or whatever country you're in. It's just start doing it. It gets back to kind of rinse repeat. It's like you want to get better at something, um, and I guess the other thing I would tie this into as well is just like other things I was mentioning, but like, you should be interested in it. If you're not, like,
Yeah.
don't
You're just forcing it.
necessarily have to. Yeah, exactly, which you can do, but I typically what I do, and, I could probably save it for when we get to writing good blog posts, um, but TLDR, like, whenever I learn something at work or, like, I thought I came up with, like, an interesting solution to something, that usually sparks, like, "Oh, maybe I should write about this," and that's typically
Hmm,
what I do. Um
hmm.
And then I was that the whole there was another question in there, right?
What makes good blog posts?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I think there's stuff that like you've probably seen them before that people call them listicles. It's like
Hmm,
essentially like here's 10, here's 10 resources you should use, and then it's just a list and that's it.
yeah.
They do get a lot of engagement on like something like Twitter and stuff, but blog post wise, not so much. Like there was like I can say for sure, like at Dev 2, they get kind of downvoted and get less visibility because people were
Oh, really?
complaining about them. So that's
Hmm,
just that's just a tip. You know, but the other thing too is like I was saying, I think writing a good blog post, being interested in it is a great way. So like something I just learned, for example, like I wrote a blog post when was it? A few days ago about like I I had this thing I fixed with React props to make it that you had to have one or the other only, uh,
Mm.
along with a bunch of other types and props, sorry. And there's stuff in TypeScript you can do. I don't want to go into the weeds too much, but there's like discriminated union types, and you can say like it's this or that. But this wasn't what I was trying to do. It was like I have this whole thing, and I wanted to have this one prop or this other prop, but they couldn't both be there. And so
Mm.
I came up with this novel. Well, I don't know how novel it is, but I learned something, and
Mm.
so I just decided to write about it. Um, I think the other thing is people don't typically read super long blog posts nowadays. Like
Oh.
I I I mean there's still like I don't know what I do typically is like if it's a long read, I'll just put it on my phone and go for a walk and I can have it dictate it to me.
Mm. Oh,
It's but
that's nice.
it's I don't know if all the browsers do it. The Edge browser on mobile does it. So I've been doing that, but it really depends on what the topic is, but I think a lot of people typically I don't know if it's just different generations and stuff, but I think people don't read as much long form content.
Mm.
So, but having said that though, you can, write several blog posts that, you know,
Yeah,
that tie into it. And
like
another
different
great
episodes.
yeah, exactly. And to tie into that, there's a feature on Dev 2 and on Hashnode where you can create a series. So, for
Mm.
example, like here's my first blog post about TypeScript. Here's my second one, and then at the top and bottom of the blog's posts, you'll see like the other ones, and it's a great way for people to rediscover your content.
Mm.
Like the latest blog post I wrote, I added it to my TypeScript series, which has about 9 posts now. So like somebody might, mm, not saying they will, but somebody might go, oh, let me go read this other one,
Mm.
so you get this rediscovery of content as well. So that's something else that can be super helpful.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely, you know, introing what you're going to talk about, breaking it up in sections and then like having a conclusion or like a wrap up of like kind of what was explained, I think is important.
Right.
Um, Aside from
I'm
that,
curious.
people like a good funny GIF, you know?
Yeah. Or a joke.
Yeah, dev jokes. I know you like those.
Yeah, right? Oh yeah, you mentioned like people don't really like long form content that much. I'm curious, like if there's usually on I think Dev2 will also do this. It'll say 1 minute read or 2 minute read. I'm curious if there's
Yeah.
like a minute read that is kind of like a nice sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kinda generalizing here too, because there's definitely people that will read a super long blog post,
Yeah, for
obviously,
sure.
but I would say, like, anywhere between 2 and 5-minute read is probably a good amount, because after
Mm.
that, it's like, you're like, "Oh, I gotta really be committed to finish
Yeah,
this."
yeah,
So, it's just something I've noticed. I don't have, like, hard data on this, but,
yeah,
it's typically from what I've seen because even though I don't work at Dev 2 anymore, I'm still a moderator there, and it's things I notice. The other thing I'd say too is, like, it's okay to promote something that like if you write a blog post and then you say, "Oh, and I work at OpenSauced and like check this out and check that out." It's okay, like the platforms typically let you do that, but it shouldn't just be a promotional post, you know what I
mm.
mean?
Yeah,
There should be like some value for somebody and then you can definitely tie it into your company if you want to, but
right.
it shouldn't just be like our product's amazing, our products are amazing, our product's amazing, and blog post, like I mean, if it's your own blog for your company, go for it. But on something like Dev 2 or Hashnode, I think it would be less popular in that sense.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. Like you gotta give value to people and then maybe sell your stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it kind of ties into I don't work in DevRel, but I feel like I've always done kind of slightly DevRelish stuff. But from people I've talked to, like I remember Jonan Scheffler, who he used to lead DevRel at, what's that observability company? It's escaping me. But anyways, he was saying obviously he's there to represent the company, but what he would always say is like just add value for the person you're speaking to, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're shilling your product, it's like, "Oh, you're stuck
Yeah.
on this, oh, try this," and it might not be related to what you're selling or whatever, but, like, the person will remember they helped you, they'll probably know, "Oh, Jonah works at this." I can't remember why I don't remember the company, but anyways, they just remember that you were helpful, and so
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's important too. Kinda a little tangent
Absolutely.
there.
No, I think you're right. All right, I think we're at the end of the stream, but before we let you go, we have to ask you one final question, which is at the end of the stream, we jump into Discord and talk about the goals that we've been working on. But before we jump into Discord, is there a goal that you've been working on in the last 30 days or the next 30 days that you want to share with us?
Sure, it's not code related or anything, but, like, it's more, on a health front, so, I train pretty hard and stuff, but I've been taking swimming lessons, and I still don't enjoy swimming. I don't know if you do, but,
I
uh,
don't
I still
either.
find it I still find it difficult. It was a lot easier when I was younger because I was a chubby kid and I used to just float, but now I've got too much muscle on me, so I just sink to the bottom. So, I've just been, taking swimming lessons and trying to improve on that for a couple reasons. One, just to make sure I know how to swim properly, and it's good exercise. So I'm just trying to improve on that. So I know it's not necessarily a tech related thing, but
It's a
I
goal.
think I think it's important because you kind of got to take care of your health to be able to function properly. So
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I feel the same way about swimming. I'm not a good swimmer, and I feel like as soon as I enter water, I feel like I'm gonna die and I'm gonna drown, and I hate the feeling of water around me. So yes, that is something that I've been trying to get better this year as well. I wouldn't say
yeah,
that I'm 100% better at it, but I'm better than where I started. So that's
yeah.
progress.
I'm still looking if there's sharks in the pool, just making sure. So
Yeah. Well, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the stream and sharing your valuable knowledge on open source and creating amazing blog posts and using open source in your career and finding jobs. I know we've been planning to have this stream for such a long time, so I'm so glad that we were finally able to make it happen.
yeah, same here, and thanks again for having me on. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I'll see you in Discord.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye.